As a lawyer, one thing I think that everybody probably needs to understand right about now is that your constitutional rights and your federal protections, right, the remedies and the protections that you have under the law, are not uniformly applied across the country. It depends on what state you live in, and to some extent it has always been that way, but today the Supreme Court came out with a ruling that is going to make that infinitely worse. So, by quick way of example, I do dog shooting cases where police officers shoot people's dogs, and I may end up suing a police officer in a city. And a few years ago, I had one of those cases go to the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, where I argued that we have security camera footage showing that the officer shot the dog after the dog was running away and was not a threat to anybody. And we just wanted to go back and let the jury see it. And the court said, no, the cop gets qualified immunity because he was reasonably unreasonable, regardless of what you think the video shows. It doesn't get to go to a jury. Several months later, the Seventh Circuit, which includes Illinois, found the exact opposite, which means that if my client's dog would have been shot in Illinois, she would have had a remedy. But because the dog was shot in Kansas City, Missouri, we didn't have a remedy. That's a frustrating lesson to have to learn firsthand, and it's incredibly infuriating to have to try to explain it to clients. But normally when there is a significant enough circuit split where the circuits disagree about something, eventually it will percolate up to the Supreme Court for them to resolve. There are also situations, however, where the circuit courts, the courts of appeals, district courts and courts of appeals in each circuit can impose a nationwide injunction. And that's what a lot of the litigation around the Trump administration so far has been. And even during the Biden administration, for example, with his student loan relief programs, right? The Fifth Circuit, which includes Texas, and the Eighth Circuit, which includes Missouri, were instrumental in issuing nationwide injunctions and ultimately blocking the implementation of those programs until they made their way up to the Supreme Court for the Supreme Court to flip the administration the bird. Now, SCOTUS is saying, no. You can no longer issue nationwide injunctions. And they did this in a naturalization case. And the problem is that poses just untenable, unconscionable positions. Because what that would say, for example, is, let's say that the circuit that comprises the state of New York said, no, Trump's actions here are unconstitutional, and meanwhile people are being deported and flown to countries that they don't belong to. You would have protection in that circuit. But if you were a American-born to non-citizen parent in Texas, you're in danger. That's how this shakes out, is that the law varies, not just in little ways anymore from circuit to circuit, but in potentially major ways. And in the context of this, it is not unforeseeable that there would be a dispute as to whether certain people in Texas are even considered American citizens anymore. You're going to be hearing a lot about the opinions that came out today, because they were bad, and they are extremely dangerous. And the dissents from the Democratic justices, they spelled that out. They spelled out the danger and the flaws in the majority's opinions, and the majority slapped back on a couple of opinions about that. Things are not going well in the judiciary right now.